What's good, guys? Welcome back to Behind the Dugouts, and I hope you are keeping well. And this is going to be the first video in my new series called Between the Lines, where I'm going to take a more in-depth look at the fixtures in the up-and-coming season and the tactical approach that Maresca takes for these games. As we've seen in the Club World Cup, he's going to be a little bit more open to tactical and formation switches, especially in this up-and-coming season. So I'm going to take a more of an in-depth look at this, but I'd also love to get your thoughts on it so we can open a bit of discussion between us. Now that that's all out the way, let's get right into it. Right, so the best way I thought that I would approach this would be go over the tactics, the formation that we would have used over the entirety of the season up until the Club World Cup. I'm not going to take the Club World Cup into consideration in this video, just because we know for a fact that Maresca wanted to tinker, he wanted to try new things, and he came out publicly saying that he is going to try new things in the Club World Cup, and we saw that. It was quite evident in the PSG games where there was a slight tactical change. There were players being asked to fill a different role than they normally would have, and normally what we would have seen over the course of last season. So I'm only going to focus on the season up until the Club World Cup. Now, the formation that we predominantly used was the 4-2-3-1. We had the 4 at the back with the 2 pivot players, 3 attacking players just in front of them, with the lone striker up top. Now, one of the things that Maresca focused on within his tactical approach was a 3-2 build-up when in possession and building out from the back. And how he adopted this and how he was able to do this is by using inverted fullback, something that we've spoken about for the entirety of the season. It's a staple of his system and how it functions. And what that is having the right or the left back, rather than playing their conventional role where operating in the left and the right hand channels, they are now moving in the midfield in order to create this 3-2 formation when we're playing out from the back, when we're, building up from the back. And how that is done is, like I said, one of these players would move into the pivot role. Enzo would move a bit further forward. Most of the time it was Cucurella moving into this pivot role. Then the 2 centre-backs would shift over, and then the full-back would then drop in to create the 3, and then we would have the 2 just in front of them. And the reason why Maresca wants to use a 3-2 build-up is to, A, overload the midfields. As you can see already here, we've got 4 players in the midfield, so we're creating an overload. To also create triangle passing lanes. As you can see, we've got a triangle here, a triangle here, a triangle there. We've got multiple triangle lanes, and this is to help get out of that press. We know once that ball's come out of the goalkeeper's foot, it's gone to either the centre-back, the right-back, the ball's going to be pressed, because most teams now like to play on a high press to win that ball back as quickly as possible. So if we've got multiple different channels, multiple different triangle lanes to play the ball out, which should in turn help us beat the press coming from the opposing team, it obviously creates an overload in midfield, as we discussed, which again helps us beat the pressing line and allows us to control the central part of the pitch. And this is vital to any football game, as if you can control the midfield, you will control the game. You're more likely to win the game. The midfield is the most vital part of the football pitch. Now, the inverting of the fullback does aid in the attack. It aids in a lot more than just helping with the 3-2 build up out from the back. As you can already see, as we mentioned, we've got the overloaded midfield. So with that inverting fullback coming into the midfield position, we've added another body in midfield. It is also allowing Enzo to push further forward to get more involved in the attack. And it helps us control the central area and helps us dominate possession of the ball. A lot of times when you're coming up against a 4-2-3-1 formation, or if we're coming up against a 4-3-3 formation, they're only really going to have either 3 to 4 players in that midfield. So if we're coming up against a formation where there's going to be 3 players in midfield, we will have the overload of 4 players here. If we are coming up against a formation, likely a 4-2-3-1 formation, they could potentially have 4 players in midfield here, which in that case, Maresca will get the striker to drop in to create 5-man in midfield, to always have that extra player to overload, because we want to control the ball, we want to dominate the midfield and control those midfield areas. Additionally, this is also going to aid us in defending the counter-attacks and preventing the counter-attacks from breaking our defensive line and getting in behind. And how it does it is adding that extra body in where he inverts, and rather than having, when normally you would have maybe a 3 as a you'll have more a central midfield player there. You would have your fullbacks bombing forward, and you would have two centre backs in there to defend counter attacks normally. But in this shape, rather than having a three, where Maresca doesn't want a three because he feels that we'll get overrun, we now have a five in that to prevent counterattacks, to protect the defensive line so it's not broken down if we were to lose the ball. And what it does create quite a narrow structure in possessions, and you're not going to get any wide overlapping fullbacks in this inverted fullback system. So what Maresca does to counter this is to focus a lot on positional play. And how this is accomplished is by getting players to focus on specific areas of the pitch that they would need to target to create structure and to create balance. So if we're looking at just how the shape is at the moment on the pitch, there is quite a considerable amount of space. You've got space in this area, we've got space over here. On the left-hand side, we've got a few spaces just in and around the striking area over here and over here. So there is quite a lot of spaces to occupy in terms when we're in possession, as well as spaces that we need to monitor when we're out of possession. And the reason Maresca focuses on positional play is to ensure that there's always passing options available no matter where we are on the pitch. It also helps us to hopefully maximize as much space as possible. As you can see, with it being overload, there's already not a lot of spaces, because you can imagine there's going to be another 3 to 4 players in and around that central area, which is going to make it compact. It's going to make it tight and really difficult to play. So we are looking to maximize all of that space to minimize as much congestion as possible with those players in, by using these spaces to allow, like Enzo and Palmer, to drop in these little half spaces to get on the ball. But then in turn, it will hopefully force the defending players to constantly have to shift, to constantly have to react to how our play is moving, which will open up gaps in and behind in those little half spaces to allow us to play through balls, to allow us to break defensive lines. And that is why we try and focus a lot on positional play, and why we try and focus on using those spaces and those gaps that are opened up by shifting and making the defenders react to our play and our movements. So if we just take a look at the scenario that I've got up on the screen here, where you can clearly see we've got a 4-man midfield, and so has the opposing team. They've also got a 4-man midfield. So at the moment, we don't have an overload. We're just going basically man for man. So what Maresca will do in this situation, as we mentioned before, is he will get the striker to drop in to become that 5th man to create an overload in midfield. Now, what this will do, and this is where we talk about positional play, is at this moment, one of the centre-backs is going to have to follow Pedro in, because what they can't do is let us have this overload. Because if we've got this overload, we're more likely going to come out of the midfield with the ball, and then immediately we're going to be on the defensive line trying to break them down, and we've got more chance of scoring. So one of these players is going to have to follow Pedro in. Once he does that, so now, as we said, they're going to have to react. They're going to have to shift in order to counteract our positional play and how we are using our tactic. Now he has created a gap. He has created a space in behind the defensive line because we've shifted one of their players out. And what this now does, it allows Pedro to make that run in behind, arc his run to occupy that space and hopefully get into a scoring position with that ball coming in. And this is what I mean by shifting and moving those players out to create those spaces in behind. Another thing that this does, and it's another tactic that Maresca likes to use, is he wants to isolate his wingers 1v1 with their fullbacks. And by doing this, so in this instance, where you've got the right centre-back, or if you're looking at it from the opposite side, the left centre-back has followed João Pedro in to create that space in behind. He's also now left his left or right back, depending on how you look at it, isolated with Pedro Neto. So we've got two options here. We can try and play through the middle and put João Pedro in behind by playing a through ball, or, which most likely happen over the course of the season, is we would shift the ball out wide to the likes of Pedro Neto to then attack his fullback 1v1, hopefully beat him, to bring in that cross with an oncoming João Pedro, an on-rushing Palmer into the box in order to get the goal. And this is quite a staple of how Maresca's tactics work. Now, another thing that Maresca expects and is part of his system is he wants his midfielders and his forward attacking players to be fluid and interchange positions throughout the match. And what we mean by this is what you'll see a lot of is players switching positions. Palmer and Enzo, for instance, you might even see Palmer at some point end up on the wing. Same with the strikers dropping in and someone filling in the gap. So he expects all his players to be able to interchange at any point to fulfill those roles. And he wants them to be technically good on the ball because they need to know how to operate in tight spaces. And it's one of the things that Gusto gets caught out quite a lot is technically on the ball he's good, but when he is in tight spaces he tends to struggle a little bit, which is why Cucurella is more trusted in the inverted role and playing in that midfield because it's congested, it's tight, it's compact, and they need to be able to play technically in those tight spaces. So, as I mentioned, we are expecting players, and Maresca expects players to interchange positions, and this makes it very, very difficult for opposing teams to defend the players. If you've got constantly your players are switching around, so if you're man marking someone and they're in the middle and the next minute they're out on the right hand side or the left hand side, it is a pain to mark it. And this does a few things. It creates unpredictability, makes it difficult for defenders to mark. It also overloads specific zones and specific spaces that we're trying to occupy and we're trying to exploit by dragging these players out of position. And it does create quite a dynamic, fluid attack because you've got central players that are constantly shifting positions. You've got wingers that could invert, not only just play out wide and come inside and try and get shots away. So as I mentioned, it is very difficult for the opposing team to defend against this when you have such a fluid attack. Now, another tactic that Maresca likes to adopt and what he expects his teams to do is a high counter press. It's got to be aggressive. It's got to be high energy because we want to regain that ball in dangerous positions. So in this scenario where we're looking at the team playing out from the back, what the inverted fullback allows us to do is to press a little bit more aggressively because Enzo's got cover in his midfield shape. So he can push on to this player. Pedro can then push on to that. So now the goalkeeper's got one or two options. He can either go long or he can play it to the only free man, as we have pretty much man-marked every other player on the pitch. You could even go more aggressive where you push Caicedo further forward, Palmer into the space that Pedro's adopting, and now you've basically marked each one of those players. So again, the team could either drop another player in there to help play out from the back, or most likely will try and go long to avoid the press, which in this instance, if they were to play in these channels here to get out of the press, to bypass it, James, Tosin, Chalobah, they would all step up to prevent this from happening. And the reason we try and play a high counter press is, as I mentioned, to regain the ball back quickly and also to disrupt the opponent's rhythm, to potentially pin them back in their own half and maintain dominance over the pitch and over the ball. Because if we're winning the ball back in these dangerous areas, they're going to struggle to get out. They're going to lose confidence, and we're going to find that we are more in control of the ball. We're more in control of the pitch, which in turn should lead to more goals and an overall bigger possession stat. Now, there are many occasions where we don't win the ball back with our high counter press and teams break through our lines, and then we have to switch. And generally when this happens, the team would switch into a 4-4-2 with a mid sort of block. And the reason we try and do this is to minimize the space, especially in the midfield. As you can see, it's very congested in that midfield area. So we want to minimize the space in midfield so teams can't play through us. And the team will work on pressing triggers. So there'll be scenarios on the pitch that will happen, either a poor touch or an overload for us in a certain area. We've got more players than them, or we could potentially win the ball, and we'll have certain triggers that will get the team to press up. And when those triggers happen, you'll see us engage and press very quickly to win that ball. And the reason for the 4-4-2 is it's quite an easy shape to maneuver, to work laterally, so players can easily fit into these positions quickly. And with players shifting laterally, they can replace positions very easily. So if Neto was to then push forward, you can have Lavia move over, Enzo would move over, Gitters would move over. So the team would shift into sideways movements in order to fill vacated spaces. And it's a lot easier to do that within a 4-4-2 formation. And then the last thing it does is it limits the spaces in behind for the opponents to exploit. So in this 4-4-2 formation, and then when they're compact and they're tight and we're boxing the midfield, there is not a lot of space to exploit for the opposing team. This is the biggest space that they've got right here in these areas. But you've got a tiny space in this between the defensive line and the midfield line. There's a tiny space in here between the midfield line and the two forward lines. So there's not a lot of space for the opposing team to occupy because our shape is so compact and it's so tight that teams will struggle to break through those lines. And this is what Maresca wants if we don't win the ball on the counter press, to get back into the shape, to get tight and to close down all those gaps and all those spaces so the other team cannot exploit. Now, look, things don't always go to plan, and tactics, you can prepare as much as you want before the game, but in the game, it doesn't always go to plan and things will change. And we saw that a lot last season where it looked like there wasn't a clear identity and we didn't quite understand what Maresca wanted. But I think as the season went on, the players got used to the system, they got to understand it a bit better. And then we started to see what Maresca wanted from the team and what we were going to see going forward. Now, there has been a slight switch in this, I think, especially in the Club World Cup and the PSG game. And I think with the players that are coming in that we're being linked to and the potential of Maresca maybe playing 2-10s, could see a slight tactical switch, maybe even a formation switch to accommodate this new idea that Maresca has, which we saw in the PSG game, where we didn't really have any inverted fullbacks. There were more the traditional sense. And it created a bit more of a fluid movement, and we got a lot of joy, especially in that PSG game, hence why we came out to become the world champions. So there is a lot to break down, and I've done my best. This is, again, my opinion on what I see of Maresca's system and the football that we play. But I do expect us going into next season to be even more solid and even more structured, because the team have played under and been in this system for a full season now, and we saw them getting better towards the end. So I expect us to kick on even further next season and potentially have this system on lock, and now adding in another style and another type of system going into next season. A lot of the biggest problem that we did have was playing against teams with low blocks, where this system doesn't necessarily work with a low block team. The new system that potentially could be played with the 2-10s could allow us to unlock those low block systems. But I'd love to know your thoughts on this, guys. Again, this is my opinion on what I see, but I'd love to know your thoughts. If there's anything that you think that I may have missed or something that you want to highlight, please drop a comment below. And if there's something you would like to see again in the future, and I can take another deep dive, potentially looking at the 2-10 system that Maresca could play next season, again, drop a comment below. Let me know. I do enjoy doing this type of thing and delving a little bit further into football, not just talking about transfers and reviewing games. I like to delve deep into the actual tactics and the football game and just use my brain a little bit and try and work things out from my perspective. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. But for now, guys, that is all from me. And if you like this video, please hit that like button. Drop a comment below. Feedback is greatly appreciated. But for now, take care of yourselves, and I will catch you in the next one.